Welcome back to working with the date function in PHP. This is part 2 of that tutorial series. And in this tutorial, during this tutorial, we're going to add 5 more formats for working with dates in PHP. In this tutorial, we'll cover check if a date is past or present. We'll look at how we calculate an age. We'll look at showing a list of dates between 2 specific dates. We'll calculate a time ago date, and we'll calculate a countdown to a date. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me know if you need any additional information or anything that should be added to the content of this tutorial. And with that, let's move into our development environment and continue working with the date function in PHP. All right, so let's go ahead and drop out of our presentation and into our development environment. I have already got my Apache server up and running. I've got my template.php file loaded, and I have got that loaded inside Google Chrome, which is the browser I'll be using for the demonstrations. So in this demonstration, we're going to check to see if a date is in the past or in the future. We'll also use a conditional statement to check whether or not that is occurring. So the first thing I want to do, I want to go ahead and save my template file. I'm going to do a save as. I'm going to save this as pastdate.php. And we're going to go ahead and load that one up in our browser. And as we've been doing in the past, I'm going to go ahead and put in an H2. Give us a heading as to what we're actually looking for. Come down a couple of lines. Let's go ahead and open up our PHP tags and close the PHP tags. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called date. And this is actually going to hold the string value of the date that we want to check against. And then I'm going to put in 3 conditional statements. The first one, and we've actually done this in the past in the previous tutorials, I'm going to put in a conditional statement that takes that date and converts it string to time. So it's going to take that string and convert it to time. And then I'm going to ask if it's greater than the current time. And if it's true, if that evaluates true inside the conditional statement, I'm going to echo out the dates in the future. Right below that, I'm going to put in another conditional statement. And this one's going to look to see if that string to time is in the past. Is it less than the current time? Let's go ahead and save those changes. And you'll notice I've got the date in there, 5/21. So if I were to refresh my browser window, it's going to tell me that the date is in the past. If I were to change this, let's go ahead and make this 5/25 because the current date today is 5/21. And I refresh it. Let's go ahead and save all our changes. Refresh the browser window. It's telling me that that date is still in the past. And that date, just because I've got 2010. I've lost my mind. Let's go ahead and make that 2016. Save the change. Now this date should be in the future. And it does. It tells me the date's in the future. So I've actually taken a string value, which is holding a date. I'm converting that string into a date variable and assigning it to the date variable. And then I'm checking to see, based on the current time, whether it's in the past or in the future. We could also check to see if it actually is the current date or the current time. The problem with that is, I'm going to go ahead and put this one in here. The problem with actually doing this check is because the way that the time is stored in seconds, it would be next to impossible to catch this where the date is now. Because in the time it takes us to run the application and then perform the conditional statement, the milliseconds will have changed, and this is probably going to be displayed in the past. So if I were to make this 5/21, which is what the current date is, and save that change, refresh the browser, by the time it gets to the conditional statement, it already is in the past because a couple of milliseconds will have passed in that time. So actually checking whether it's actually now, you're probably very, very, very seldom, if ever, going to get that to confirm true. And by the way, for anyone that's not aware, milliseconds are thousandths of a second, and that's how fast it's updating that date variable. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look at an age. This is a really handy function as it takes the date parameter and returns the age. It's very useful on websites where you need to check out that a person's over a certain age to create an account. And you can base that on a form that you submit or they submit with their birthday. Now, obviously, we know that you could easily fudge your birthday on the internet, but no one would ever do that because everybody's 150% honest on everything they do on the internet. Sure. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do save. Let's go ahead and do save as, because I actually want to save this as age.php. I'm going to save that new file. I'm going to go back into my browser and load up that new file. That's the one we'll be making our changes on. By the way, that would have been a great time to pause if you want to go ahead and type that in. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come right below where we had our closing PHP tag, and I'm going to put in another heading. Actually, I'm going to put in a couple of break statements also. Give us a couple of line feeds so we're not all crunched up on one another. Put in my H2, which says that we're actually going to be calculating an age in this particular demonstration. And again, as we've been doing in the past, I'm going to go ahead and open and close my PHP tags. So let's go ahead and open up our PHP tags. Come down a few lines and close the PHP tags. And again, I'm going to copy this in so you don't have to watch me type it, and I'll explain it. We're going to create a function. And inside that function, we're going to do a few things. And I will talk through these as soon as I get all this stuff added. Let me go ahead and clean up our formatting. And there, that looks much better. Okay, so I've created a function here and I've named the function age. And that function requires a parameter called DOB for date of birth. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm saying if not empty. So if date of birth is not empty, I want you to generate a variable called birth date. That's going to be equal to a new date time, and we're using that object again that we talked about in the previous tutorial. And then I want you to create another variable called today, which is going to be a new date time, which is going to be today. Then I want you to create a variable called age, and I want you to take the birth date and give me the difference between the birth date and today. And I want you to sum that up in years. And remember, it's going to use that floor. When we looked at those values, it's going to give me the floor of that, so it's going to give me the number of years that we have different between the birth date and today. And then I want you to return that to a variable called age. By the way, if it is empty, it's just going to return a 0 and drop out of the function. So the next thing we need to do in order for this to work, we've got to create the date of birth variable. So I'm going to go create a variable called DOB, and that is going to be equal, for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to put 1900-04-10. So April 10th, 1900 was this guy's birthday. 1990, I'm sorry, was this guy's birthday. And then I'm going to echo the age, and I want to pass in that DOB. So in other words, I'm calling the function age, which is the name of the function, we gave it up here, and I'm going to echo back the value that it gives me. And remember, it's going to return that age based on whatever value that we've put inside our date of birth. So let's go ahead and save all those changes. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit. Great time to pause if you want to type that in. Let's go ahead and refresh our browser, and you'll notice it calculated the age at 26. And based on the fact that this is 2016, that would be a good age, 26. If I were to make this 2015, 2015, let's go ahead and save that change, refresh the browser. Now that person's only 1 year old. So we're getting a good age calculation, and because we're using that literal value of y, and it's giving us the floor, it's giving us the nearest full integer, so it's just giving us the full years. The next one we're going to look at is to show a list of days between two dates. That's actually a pretty cool one. All right, so in this demonstration, we're going to get a list of days that are between two dates. One of the keys here is that you have to have your default time zone set up in your PHP config file. My guess is most of you probably do, but I'm just letting you know if you see an issue with this, you really need to have that default time zone set up, or else this probably will not work. And again, it's in your PHP config file. And again, based on the power that's built into PHP, actually calculating the days between two dates is a pretty simple process. So let's go ahead and do save as. I'm going to save this as days.php, D-A-Y-S. I'm going to go back and refresh my browser and load that up in my browser, so we're working with the right file. First thing I want to do is just like we had done in the past, I'm going to go ahead and put an H2 so we identify what we're doing in this particular portion of the code. And again, this is for your benefit as you work through these. Let's go ahead and put in a line break above that just to make sure we got a little bit of separation. And then I'm going to open up my PHP tags, and I'm going to come down a couple lines and close my PHP tag. First thing I want to do is I want to create two variables. So I'm going to come inside the PHP tags, and I'm going to create a variable called start date. And again, you'll notice we're using those new objects, that datetime object in the object-oriented programming, So we're creating a new datetime object with a start date and a new datetime object with an end date. You'll notice my start date is going to be May 1st, 2016. My end date is going to be May 22nd, 2016. Then what I want to do is I actually want to do some calculations on these. So I'm going to come down right below that. And we have a lot of things that are built into this datetime object, as you're going to see right here. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a new date period. And again, another object class inside of PHP. I'm assigning it to the period value. And it's going to have my start date. It's going to take that start date. It's going to give me a new date interval, P1D, which I'm going to explain in a minute what those values mean. Then it's going to put in the end date, and then it's going to date period is going to exclude my start date. This is an optional value. You don't have to put this in here. One thing I do want to point out is when you're dealing with this class, you notice as we go into these methods of the class, I am not putting a semicolon. I'm ending these with a comma. So if you're dealing with classes, again, we don't end up with a semicolon, we end up with a comma. When I go after the exclude start date method, you'll notice I have 2 colons there. That is the proper syntax. Next thing I want to do is I want to run a for each loop because I want to print each one of these days out. And again, I'm going to talk about how we've done this, how this is set up in 1 minute. But I'm going to put in a for each loop, and I'm going to say for each period, and remember I'm referring to this new class, for each period as date, I want you to echo the date in this format. So I'm going to have the year, the month, the day, and the date. And I'm going to put in a line break. That's my concatenation symbol, and I'm adding a line break to it, and I'm ending that in a semicolon. So let me go ahead and take out some of these blank spaces. Let's go ahead and save all these changes. Great time to pause if you need to type this in, and I'm going to talk you through how we set up this class. Again, just a reminder, your time zone needs to be set for this to work correctly because we're using these classes. So the first parameter is the new class. We've talked about this date time class already a couple times. We've created 2 new objects of that class with a start date and an end date. Then we're creating a new date period class. And in that date period, I'm assigning my start date object, a new date interval, which has a P1D. The P is for a period we're looking for. The 1 is the interval of the period, and capital D means we're looking for days. And again, we talked about this in the previous tutorial. You can find all this inside where we talk about these literals inside that php.net manual, dateinterval.format.php. That's what we're setting up in here. Again, the P is for the period that we're looking for a period of time. 1 is the interval for looking each increment 1 day, and D is that we're looking for days. And the date period, again, I'm just excluding the start date. This is completely optional. You don't have to put it in here. And then I'm running a standard for each loop. For each one of these new date periods that we create, I want you to set it up as a date in the date variable. Then I want you to print the date variable in this particular format. And again, this goes back to the other manual that we talked about where we actually set up formatting for these displays. And that was in the php.net manual function.date.php. So let's go ahead and save all those changes. Let's get back into our browser window, refresh the browser window, and now you see we get the calculated days that are between our dates. And again, we're starting out. Remember, we put our first date of May 1st, but we told it to exclude the start date. So we're actually starting on May 2nd, and it's printing out the year, the month, the 3-letter day, and then the date. And it goes all the way up to the end date, which was May 22nd. It stops right there, May 21st, which is exactly where it's supposed to stop. So a very, very cool way to calculate the days between 2 specific dates. And by the way, this could be huge. If I made this 2015 and save that change, this saves all these in an array. So now that array, you'll notice that my browser window became gigantic because it's going to walk through every day between those dates. And it just built those into an array called date. And that's where we're actually printing that date out, where we actually get it out of there. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 2016, save the change, refresh our browser window, and now we've got those original 15 or 20 days that we started out with. And again, I want to point out, these end with commas, not semicolons, when we're dealing with the methods of the class. And the date period, when we're actually pulling this out, is 2 colons. Then we run through that for each loop to display each one on our screen. By the way, we could have actually as easily just populated these into a database, wrote them into a database if that's what we wanted to do. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is time ago dates. All right, so in this demonstration, we're going to look at time ago dates. I want to go ahead and do save as. Let's save this as timeago.php. Save that change. I'm going to come down right below our closing PHP tag. Let's put in another H2. Just so we remember what this code was for, I'm going to go ahead and put in a break tag right above that. Open my PHP tags. Come down a few lines and close those PHP tags. First thing I want to do is I want to create a variable. This is going to be a variable that I'm going to call time. And we're going to convert this immediately into a string to time variable. So I'm actually taking this string text, converting it immediately into a string to time, and assigning it to that time variable. Now we're going to do a whole lot of things with this. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in so you don't have to watch me type, because I've got a lot of things going on here. And I'm going to take that time variable, and it's going to be equal to time minus the current time. So I'm going to get the time since that last moment. So time is going to be equal to, and then I'm going to run through this ternary conditional statement. And then I'm going to put these tokens in an array. I've got 31,536,000 seconds equal a year. 2,252,000 seconds equal a month. Then a week is 604,800 seconds. A day is 86,400 seconds. An hour is 3,600 seconds. A minute 60, and so on and so forth. And we're actually going to be using those values to help us calculate the time since. And then I'm actually going to go into a for each loop. Let me come down, because what I want to do now is I want to take this for each loop, and I'm going to come down right below where we built our tokens. And I'm going to say for each token as a unit, and it's going to be equal to text. And then if time is less than unit, continue. And then I create a variable called number of units equal floor time divided by the units. Let me go ahead and clean up my formatting here. And then I say return number of units with a space dot text, number of units is greater than 1. And then I put an S for, in other words, hours, years, seconds. So I'm adding an S if it's greater than 1. If it's not, I just leave that blank. And I believe I've got everything lined up here the way it should be, because that actually, I'm looking for my closing brace to make sure I didn't miss a closing brace. My time is, oh, I did miss a closing brace. Holy mackerel. I missed the name of my function. I didn't think that looked right, because all that time stuff should be inside of a function. And there we go. That's much better. I knew it looked kind of funny, because there was my closing brace for the function, and I had lost it. And then before the function, I actually create a couple of variables. Okay, I knew that. I'm looking at that saying, wait a minute, where's all my stuff going to work here? There we go. Okay, so I've got a time variable that I'm doing a convert to string, basically just a value. Then I'm going to do echo event happened, and then it's going to give me how long ago. And then I run into this human timing function. You'll notice we're calling the function here, and we're passing in the value that we gave it right there. And then it's going to calculate the time since that date. So let's go ahead and save all those changes. Make sure I got time ago loaded up inside my browser, which I don't. And you'll notice down here at the bottom, event happened 3 years ago. And that's right, because I did 2013, and I'm only looking for the years. So if I said, let's make it 1997, save, refresh. Event happened 19 years ago. Now if I were to make it 2016, and this is why I actually like this. And by the way, this is how your blogs work, where they actually tell you how long ago that post was occurred, or how long ago when you enter that forum that request occurred. Because they actually base it on how long ago the post actually was. You'll notice When I get into 2016 519, it's telling me now that was only 1 day ago. If I actually go to 419, it's going to round it to the next highest value. So that was 1 month ago. If I say 2015, it's going to say 1 year ago. Round it there, so it was 1 year ago. Now, so you'll notice it's rounding to the nearest value. When we do the years, it rounds to the nearest year. We do the month, it rounds to the nearest month, and so on and so forth. It's a very cool little application, and it's how we actually get those values for posts on a blog, entries into a forum, and all that cool stuff. So the next thing we're going to do, the next thing we're going to demonstrate is actually a countdown timer in PHP, and that's what we'll be doing next. All right, so in our countdown timer, we're going to do things a little bit different. I want to go back and let's go ahead and close out that template file that we just worked on time ago. I'm going to reload my template, and I want to do a save as. I want a fresh page for this one because I'm going to do some other things with this other than just put in some PHP code. And I'm going to call this countdown.php. Let's go ahead and save all those changes. Let's go ahead and load that one up in our browser. That should be a nice, clean, brand new window, which it is. The first thing I want to do, because of the way I'm going to display this, I want to go ahead and add a little bit of styles to my head section of my document. Normally this would be an external style sheet, but for the sake of this demonstration and for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and include this in the document. So I'm setting up a green color, then I'm going to go ahead and do some formatting on an H2. I'm just trying to clean up my code formatting here. Clean up that code formatting a little bit. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong key. It's becoming frustrating today. I don't like this keyboard. I got a new keyboard for my system and I really don't like it. It's time for probably me to change. I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Great time to pause if you want to type in those styles that we're going to be using for this particular demonstration. Then I'm going to go ahead and add an H2, just like we've been doing in the past. So I'm going to come right down into the body section, right below my main title, and just add an H2, working with PHP date functions, and this is going to be a countdown. Go ahead and save that change. Let's go ahead and refresh our browser, make sure we're in the right file, which we are. Perfect. And now what I want to do is we're going to have a little bit of PHP code. Not a whole lot, but a little. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to talk you through it once I get it in. So I'm going to come right down below that H2. I am going to open my PHP tags, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable called date, and I'm going to convert the string to time, December 25th, 2016, 12 a.m. So I'm converting that and putting it inside my date variable. Then I'm going to create a variable called remaining, and remaining is going to be equal to the date minus the current time. Then right below that, I'm going to create another variable called days underscore remaining, and I'm going to put that to the floor. In other words, I'm going to round it down to the nearest integer, and I'm going to take the remaining and divide it by 86,400. And we know based on what we've been doing earlier, 86,400 is the number of seconds in a day. Then I'm going to take hours remaining, and I'm going to say, okay, put that to the floor and take remaining, and I want the modulus of 86,400 divided by 36,400. So I'm looking at the remainder from what I had in the previous example, where I subtracted this, and then for the minutes, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the remainder of that, and again, 36 divided by 60, that's going to give me minutes. Then what I want to do is I want to display this inside my browser. So what I've done is I've set up an H2, and I'm going to come outside my PHP closing tag, and I'm going to create an H2, and I'm just going to have a whole bunch of stuff going on here. I'm going to say I'm going to open up a span, give it a class of green, and that's where we're getting this up here, where we set up that class. And I'm going to echo the days remaining. I'm going to close my span, days, and then I'm going to open a new span, do the same thing, but this time I'm echoing the hours remaining. Close the span, hours, and open up another span. And in this one, I'm going to put minutes remaining until next Christmas, or until Christmas. Actually, I push it at Christmas 2016. So let's go ahead and save those changes. This is a great time to pause if you want to type this in. Let me go ahead and spread this out, see if I can get this without, so it doesn't wrap quite as bad. That might be a little better, easier to see. Good time to pause if you want to type it in. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this back down. We're going to go into our browser. I'm going to refresh the browser window. And you'll see there are 217 days, 8 hours, and 24 minutes remaining until Christmas 2016. And what you could do, and what I would normally do, by the way, if this was on a site, I'd actually put an onload event inside my body. I'd write a little bit of JavaScript so that this would update automatically. I'd probably set the interval at maybe every 3 or 4 seconds, or maybe every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, I'd perform a reload on the page, which would update these numbers. Because if I update it now, you'll notice it dropped from 24 to 23. And again, every time you refresh this page, as long as more than a minute has elapsed, this will set down. In fact, if I change this date, let's make it December 19th. Save that change, refresh my browser. You're going to notice now we're going to lose days, some hours, and probably some minutes. So it went to 211 days, 8 hours, 23 minutes. And if I were to change this, make this 0500 and make this 30, you're going to see everything adjust. So you can actually set this to any particular time you want and have it maintain a track of that time either in your web application or on your website. And again, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add something to the onload event inside the body element so that I set an interval and it's actually running a function. As that interval expires or meets the requirement, it'll run the function, which will normally refresh the page. I actually use these quite a bit. I haven't used them on any of my personal sites, but I've actually used them for customers. A lot of customers will do sales, or they'll have countdowns to a particular discount where it's going away in 2 days or 20 hours or whatever. And they'll actually keep track of it on something like this, and it will update the site dynamically. You've probably seen them on sites that you visited, because I mean, they are pretty popular. Anyway, we have covered 10 of the most questions that I receive about how we use the date function inside PHP over the last 2 tutorials. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can think of any other things that I probably should include, or if you've ever had questions about how to do something particular with a date or time inside PHP, drop me an email, drop me a comment at the bottom of these videos, and I can probably add it for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Take care of yourself.